Cheap doesn't have to mean cheap and nasty. It can also mean cheap and cheerful. Perhaps with just a little bit of nasty. Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. I'm usually pretty happy when I make these videos, but today my grin is bigger than usual because I'm wearing a watch that I have been wanting to pick up for ages. It's the Armatron Griffey. Armatron Griffey, Jody, what's the problem been there? Well, I looked for these for donkey's years it seemed, but they were only available in the US. Couldn't find any on eBay Australia, couldn't find any on Amazon Australia, so I kind of gave up and forgot about it. But that didn't stop me recommending the watch to you. Indeed, I included it in my 5-piece budget watch collection video not too many weeks ago. I suggested it was the perfect bonus watch, your 5th watch in the $1,000 all bases covered collection. For around $60 US, that's the price if you're buying them direct from Armatron. Now I mentioned in that video that I couldn't get one here in Australia. I had a number of you email me offering to send me these watches, incredible generosity. I also had somebody commenting saying, Jody, you're a muppet, you can buy them from amazon.com.au, and now you can, and that's exactly what I've done. I didn't pay 60 US either, I only ended up paying about $45 US equivalent for this one, and I could not be happier with the watch that I got for the cash. It's not going to be a long video, this one. It's not going to be a watch for everyone, but if you want to have fun for less than a 50, you should definitely check this out. Let's flip the camera and do just that. Alright, let's start with the price because price adds context, but I'm not going to start with the price of the Armatron Griffey. I'm going to start with the price of the other LED watches on the market. I suspect for a lot of people, an LED is going to be either a trip down memory lane or a bit of a novelty. How much do you want to spend for a novelty? Do you want to spend $700 on a trip down memory lane or a novelty? That's the price of the Hamilton PSR. That's probably why I haven't seen too many of these Hamilton PSRs in the wild yet, and I certainly haven't even thought about picking one up for the channel. I do, however, have a Gerlach Cosmonauta in my collection. I have recommended it to you previously. It's a different level of quality from the Armatron with sapphire crystal and some proper water resistance, but $333, it should be a different level of quality. The closest comparable watch is the Yema LED, but even then it's $225 US. And the bracelet on the Yema is arguably worse than the bracelet on the Armatron. Even if you buy it direct from Armatron, you should be paying no more than $70 for one of these. Some of the other colour variants are $60. That is just over a quarter of the price of the closest competition, the Yema. But of course you don't have to buy it directly from Armatron, do you? $35 US on Amazon. I'll leave a link to that one in the description of the video. A little more for the black variant, and they've only got a limited selection of colours here, but I wanted this gold and red one, and that's how much I paid. And you know what? I wasn't expecting an awful lot for the money. I have been pleasantly surprised by this one. Armatron, established 1975. Lots of good things were established in 1975, as you saw from my t-shirt in the intro. I wasn't expecting much from the packaging, which is just as well because it's a little bit ratty, to be honest. But it did come with a tiny and somewhat unnecessary instruction manual because it is probably the most simple watch I have ever reviewed. Push the button on the side of the case once to display the time. If you press it a second time, it will show you the date. If you press it a third time, it will show you a ticking second. If you press it a fourth time, you're back to the time, which lasts for approximately 5 seconds before fading again to a blank screen. If you press the button on the side of the case once and then hold down this second button here, it flips into set mode. You can alternate between 12 and 24 hour mode. Then you can set the hour, you can set the minute, you can set the second, you can set the year, the date and the day, etc. And you're back to the time, and that is your lot. But notice how big and how bright those numerals are. They are so much bigger than just about every other LED watch on the market. I mean, look at it compared to my Gerlach Cosmonauta. Not only much bigger, but much brighter and lasting for longer with a single push of the button. That means it gets close to sidestepping one of the big problems of the LED watches that I have reviewed on the channel so far, that being that they're next to useless in sunlight. This one is actually still pretty usable under most circumstances. And it's actually not that small when you get it on wrist. It's certainly a bit larger than the dimensions would suggest. Those dimensions being 34.6 mil in diameter. They call it a 34. I measure it a little more than that across the middle. 9.9 mil thick, pretty much bang on a centimetre. 40 mil lug to lug. Now, lug width, 16mm. This thing would not look good on a leather strap, to be honest. You'd be chopping it up to try and fit it on. So you're stuck with this bracelet. How is the bracelet? I'll tell you about that in just a second or two. Also, it's a little bit heavier than you might expect, certainly heavier than the equivalent resin-bodied Casio that is then coated. This one coming in at 73 grams. And that's because the head of the watch is not made of resin, it's actually made of metal, and it has been rather nicely finished as well. Brushed on the side, there's a high polish chamfer running from tip to tip of the lugs on both sides. The brushing itself on the top surface is kind of longitudinal, but as you can see there, it's slightly wonky. It runs at a bit of an angle, but I think for $35, I can forgive that. And the bracelet then, well, it may be just a little bit nasty, but it's actually alright. Now these are rolled links, as you can clearly see here, but they're arguably the best rolled links that I've seen. Far better than Seiko 5s, far better than cheap Casios, and I'm going to stick my neck out here and say that this is probably a better bracelet than was on the Yema, costing 4 times as much. Certainly it hasn't nipped nearly as many of my hairs because you see from the side profile, those links are really tightly pressed. It's the gaps that nip the hairs. It's not the links themselves, but the gaps between and within them. And this one is not too bad. It is a press-on stainless steel caseback, giving this watch 50 meters of water resistance. I'm guessing the 2 pushers are the potential incursion points, and that is a mineral crystal covering the dial. And you know what? This is going to be the most brief outdoor macro section you've ever seen because the watch doesn't really do anything unless you press the button. So here is the top-down shot. This is the diagonal shot. This is the other diagonal shot. Here it is doing not very much from an oblique angle. And finally, here is the watch not doing very much from the side shot. The other big problem of LED watches is that you need 2 hands to operate them. The one hand that's attached to the wrist that the watch is on, and the other hand to press the button. But as you can see here, it actually looks okay outside. Those are big and bright LEDs. And after dark, they are fabulously legible as well, obviously. This camera doesn't quite do them justice. It's a really deep red, very clear, very bright. Now it's obviously not a particularly large watch at 34-ish mil and 40 lug to lug. Wears like a Casio 168 if you have experience of that model, the 168 being slightly bigger and bulkier than the 158, but at 75 grams doesn't really feel like a toy in the way that some of those lighter Casios can do. And there you are. Second arm required to read the time. Legibility therefore is very much dependent on the ambient light conditions, but with those big bright LEDs it's not too bad. And as you can see, I set my LED watches to 24-hour time. Not quite sure why. I just think that it fits the 70s vibe a little better than 12-hour time. And once again, this section is going to be pretty brief. Here is the watch doing not very much in natural light. At least you can get to see the mixed finishing of that metal case. And here's the watch not doing very much on my wrist. Small and neat, but it doesn't feel flimsy, and not a hair nipper, which is quite a relief because almost universally these rolled link bracelets tend to be. And because it is not a hair nipper, it means you can wear the watch looser. You can wear it below the knuckle. It can slide up and down your wrist without fear of any depilatory action. Moans and niggles, well, look, for $35 you do not get a luxury watch, and yeah, it's okay, it doesn't nip your hairs, but it's not a particularly good bracelet, and with 16mm lugs you're pretty limited as to what you do with it from here on in. If you do want to get rid of the stock bracelet, you need 2 hands to operate it, and in bright sunlight you are still going to struggle with that LED. And I think some of the colour combos are more successful than others. Call me a purist if there is such a thing, but I would stick with the red LEDs. I think it looks better, and that's what they were all like in the 1970s. But if you want to have a bit of fun, there's blue and there's green as alternatives. But overall, I didn't have particularly high expectations of the Armatron Griffey, and it has surpassed them in almost every way. A lot of fun, this one, far more solidly made and solid feeling than the equivalently priced Casio. And let's face it, so cheap that you can pick one up even if it is just for the novelty value. So there you have it, the Armatron Griffey, cheap and only just a little bit nasty. Mostly it's cheerful. Fantastic if you like that LED style but don't quite have the money for one of the more expensive models. Nothing wrong with this one at all. If you do have money for the more expensive models though, check out the Gerlach Cosmonauta or the LED by Yema. Thanks for watching, see you again soon.